Sonia was crying as she married an elderly man. On their first night together, he went to the bathroom, and when he came out, she turned pale. But before we continue, please write in the comments which city you are watching this video from. Enjoy! Sonia grew up in a small village. Her family, father Ivan, mother Maria, and younger brother Alexei lived in a constant struggle for survival. Ivan repaired neighbors' sheds or helped on farms when called. Maria sewed at night, bent over an old machine under the dim light of a lamp, but money was barely enough for bread, potatoes, and meat on holidays. Sonia, the eldest, knew hunger from a young age. She was 16 when she first refused dinner, claiming she wasn't hungry so that Alexei, thin and perpetually sick, could finish her portion. She would sit by the window in the evenings, looking at the dark silhouettes of trees, and dream of the day her family would no longer have to count pennies. Work in the village was scarce, the youth moved to the city, and those who stayed clung to any opportunity to make ends meet. Sonia and Alexei also tried to find something, but their efforts were dashed against the world's indifference. Evan often repeated, "We'll manage, the main thing is to stick together." But Sonia saw her father's back growing more stooped each year and her mother's eyes growing more tired. She knew that if nothing changed, their lives would remain an endless cycle of poverty. Despite their poverty, Ivan and Maria believed in the power of knowledge. "Study, children," they would say, "that's your ticket to a different life." Sonia clung to these words like a lifeline. Her efforts paid off. School helped her secure a free place at a university and a scholarship. Leaving for the city, Sonia felt for the first time that she had a chance. The university became a new world for her: lectures, books, bustling corridors. She studied economics, dreaming of one day opening her own business and pulling her family out of debt. But reality was harsh in the city. Connections and money mattered more than a diploma. Sonia returned home with a suitcase and shattered dreams, finding work as a cashier in a store. Shift after shift, she stood at the register, smiling at the rare customers and counting change, realizing that her dreams were once again on hold. Alexei also struggled. He graduated from school, but without higher education, he was only hired for odd jobs, unloading sacks or shoveling snow. The shadow of their poor family hung over them, scaring away those who might have given them a chance. Sonia saw her brother clenching his fists as he returned home after another rejection, and her heart ached with pain. Sonia was a beautiful girl with long chestnut hair and clear gray eyes that radiated kindness. But her beauty did not help in love. Men in the village looked at her with pity or indifference. Who would take a wife without a dowry? The neighbors whispered. Sonia dreamed of a family, of a warm home where there would be no fear of tomorrow. But every time someone showed interest in her, the conversation quickly turned to her poverty. One day, a young man from a neighboring village, Sergei, invited her for a walk. They talked about trivial things, laughed, and for a moment, Sonia believed it was the beginning of something bigger. But a week later, he disappeared, and then she heard from his sister. He said he couldn't handle such a burden. The words cut like a knife. Sonia returned home, locked herself in her room, and cried until she fell asleep. Alexei also suffered. Girls rejected him as soon as they found out he was from that shabby house. They shared their sorrows. "We're no worse than others," Alexei would say, squeezing her hand. "We're just unlucky." Sonia nodded, but deep down she felt that loneliness was becoming her companion. One day, a man named Mikhail appeared in the store. He was over 60, with gray hair and deep wrinkles on his face. He came almost every day, buying bread, cheese, or a bottle of milk, and always left Sonia generous tips. His eyes, lively and attentive, looked at her with an inexplicable warmth. Sonia grew accustomed to him as a regular customer until one day he lingered at the register longer than usual. "Sonia," he said softly but firmly, "I want to talk to you." "Not here. May I come to your house tomorrow?" She was taken aback but nodded. The next day, Mikhail arrived with a basket of food and sweets that Sonia hadn't seen in months. Ivan and Maria greeted him warily, but he carried himself with simple dignity. Then, sitting at their rickety table, he made an offer that took Sonia's breath away. "I want you to be my wife. I am not young, but I have means. I will take care of you and your family. You will want for nothing." The words hung in the air. Sonia looked at him, not knowing what to say. Mikhail added that he did not require an immediate answer and left, leaving behind silence and a basket of gifts. That night Sonia couldn't sleep. She lay in her room staring at the ceiling, thinking about Mikhail's proposal. She was 25, and he was over 60. She did not love him, did not know him truly, but his words about saving her family echoed in her mind. Sonia remembered her mother crying as she sold her earrings to buy medicine for Alexei, and her father returning home empty-handed because an employer had cheated him. She thought of her brother who deserved better and of herself. Of dreams that might never come true. Marriage to Mikhail was not about love but about sacrifice. But wasn't it for her family that she had always wanted something more? In the morning she went out to the yard where her mother was hanging laundry. "Mom, what should I do?" Sonia asked, her voice trembling. Maria looked at her daughter with a long gaze. "It's your choice, Sonia. But know that we do not want your unhappiness." Sonia nodded, but inside she already knew the answer. For them, she would agree. Sonia gathered her parents and brother around the table. "I will marry Mikhail," she said softly. Ivan frowned, Maria squeezed her hand. And Alexei jumped up. "You shouldn't. He's an old man." Sonia shook her head. "He is kind, and he promised to help us. I will manage." Her parents tried to dissuade her, but Sonia was resolute. "You have done so much for us, now it's my turn." Ivan sighed, and Maria hugged her daughter, whispering, "We will always be here for you." Sonia vowed to endure everything for their happiness. She felt not like a girl, but like a soldier going into battle. A few days later, Mikhail came again. Sonia put on her best dress, simple but neat. She trembled as she opened the door, but he smiled so warmly that her fear subsided a little. Mikhail greeted Ivan and Maria, shook Alexei's hand, and then turned to Sonia. "I am glad you agreed," he said, standing before her and getting down on one knee. Sonia blushed, her parents froze, and she nodded as he placed a simple silver ring on her finger. Behind his calm demeanor, she saw kindness, and this gave her hope that things were not as scary as they seemed. After the engagement, they began to spend more time together. Mikhail visited their home, bringing gifts, clothes, and even a new jacket for Ivan. He told Sonia about his life, how he had lost his wife many years ago, and how he had built his business in the city. His voice was low but gentle, filled with wisdom. Sonia also opened up to him. She talked about her dreams, her love for learning, and her family, who were her support. Mikhail listened attentively, sometimes nodding, sometimes asking questions. "You are strong, Sonia," he said one day. These words touched her, and she began to see in him not just an old man but someone she could trust. The wedding was set for a month later. Maria and the neighbors helped Sonia prepare, sewing a dress from old tulle and decorating it with lace. Sonia tried it on in front of the mirror, but each time she felt like a stranger. But her heart whispered that this was not her fairy tale. The age difference, his wealth, her sacrifice, it all weighed heavily on her. Mikhail sent money for food and flowers, but Sonia could not shake off her doubts. "What if I can't do it?" she asked herself, looking out the window. But then she remembered her father, mother, and brother, and her resolve returned. On her wedding day, Sonia stood in front of the mirror in a white dress. Her hair was styled, and she held a bouquet of wildflowers in her hands. Maria came up behind her, hugged her, and said, "You are strong, Sonia. Remember that." Sonia nodded, but tears were already streaming down her cheeks. The ceremony took place in the village church. Mikhail was in a formal suit, his gray hair gleaming in the candlelight. Sonia gave her consent with a trembling voice, and he placed a gold ring on her finger. She sobbed as she left, unable to contain the mix of fear, hope, and sorrow. The guests thought it was from happiness, but Sonia knew the truth. After the wedding, Michael took Sonia to his home in the city. It was a mansion with high ceilings, marble floors, and servants who bowed as she entered. Sonia felt out of place. Her village boots seemed ridiculous against the backdrop of luxury. Michael noticed her anxiety and took her hand. "Give yourself time to get used to it," he said gently. That evening, exhausted from the new impressions, she asked permission to retire to her room. Closing the door, Sonia fell onto the bed and, for the first time that day, allowed herself to relax. But sleep did not come. She thought about what she had left behind and what lay ahead. But soon a strange sound interrupted her thoughts, the muffled sound of water coming from the bathroom through the wall. Sonia opened her eyes, listening. The sound was soft but insistent, like the murmur of a stream, and in the silence of the huge house, it seemed louder than it was. She sat up in bed, her heartbeat quickening slightly. Maybe Michael is not feeling well. After all, he is not young, she thought, remembering his gray hair and slow movements. What if he needed help? This thought compelled her to overcome her doubts. Sonia got up, put on a light robe over her nightgown, and walked barefoot to the door. The corridor was shrouded in darkness, with only a thin streak of light coming from under the bathroom door. Sonia stopped, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She felt like an intruder in this house, in this life, but concern overcame her discomfort. "Misha," she called softly, almost whispering, afraid to disturb the night's silence. There was no response, only the sound of water grew slightly louder, as if someone had turned on the faucet stronger. Sonia swallowed the lump in her throat and knocked lightly on the door. Suddenly the door swung open, and before her stood a figure. Sonia stepped back, her breath catching. It was not the Michael she knew. Before her stood a tall man with thick hair falling over his forehead and lively piercing eyes that reflected the light of the lamps. His skin was smooth, without a single wrinkle, and his posture was strong and confident, like that of a man in his prime. He looked at her with a gentle smile that took her breath away and made her legs buckle. She froze as if time had stopped. Her mind refused to comprehend what was happening. This was Michael, and yet not him, without the burden of years she was used to seeing. Her heart pounded so hard that she pressed her hand to her chest, as if trying to calm it. "Who are you?" she gasped hoarsely, almost inaudibly. "Sonia, do not be afraid," he said, taking a step towards her. His voice was the same low, warm tone, but now it held an energy she had not noticed before. "It's me," he said, standing before her. She shook her head, taking a step back until she pressed against the wall. The cold plaster seeped through the thin fabric of her robe, but she barely noticed. "No," she whispered. Her eyes darted across his face, searching for something to explain this nightmare. "This is impossible," she thought. She wanted to scream, to run, but her feet seemed rooted to the floor, and her voice failed, leaving only a lump in her throat. Michael raised his hands, showing his palms. "Please, let me explain," he said gently, but there was a plea in his tone. He took another step, and Sonia pressed herself against the wall. "Sit down, Sonia," he asked, pointing to a sofa around the corner of the hallway. "I will explain everything." She did not move until he stepped back first, giving her space. Finally, gathering her strength, Sonia pushed herself off the wall and slowly walked towards him. Her legs trembled, and each step echoed in her temples like a hammer blow. She sat down on the edge of the sofa, clenching her fists to stop the trembling. Michael sat opposite her at a safe distance and began to speak. "I am not who I seem to be," he began, looking her straight in the eyes. "I used makeup and a wig, wore long-sleeved clothes to appear older. My grandfather, a wealthy man who died a year ago, left me not just money, but a request to find a worthy wife. He knew about you, Sonia, and insisted that I check who you really are." The words fell like stones into water, shattering the silence and attention of the world. Sonia listened, not believing her ears. Makeup, a wig, a will. It sounded like a fairy tale, like a crazy dream from which she could not wake up. She looked at him, searching for signs of deception, but saw only sincerity in his eyes. Those same eyes she had grown accustomed to thinking of as tired and old. "I wanted to understand whether you would marry me for money," he continued, and his voice trembled, as if it pained him to say it. "Or if there was something more in you. And I saw, Sonia, you agreed not for yourself, but for your family. You sacrifice everything you have for those you love. That is rare, and I could not remain indifferent." Sonia was silent, her mind spinning in a whirlwind of emotions. She remembered her tears at the wedding, her fear of the wedding night, her resolve for her family. And now this man, not an old man but a young one, was telling her that it had all been a test. Her world had turned upside down in an instant, and she did not know whether to rejoice or scream in outrage. "You lied to me," she finally managed to say, her voice breaking on the high note. The tears she had held back for so long poured out. "You made me think I was marrying an old man, that I was giving up my life for." "For what?" "So that you could be sure of my goodness." Michael lowered his head, and a flicker of pain crossed his eyes. "Forgive me," he said softly. "I did not want to hurt you. I wanted to know the real you. And I saw more than I expected." Sonia covered her face with her hands, trying to stop the tears. Her chest tightened with sobs, and her heart was torn between anger and a strange, inexplicable relief. She did not know what to feel, betrayal or hope. But one thing was clear: the person before her was not the one she had married, and there was something frightening and incredibly attractive about that. Michael continued, "My grandfather met you in the store. You helped him carry his bags to the car, even though he was a stranger. You did not know he was wealthy, but you smiled and wished him a good day. He spoke of you until his last breath." Sonia remembered that day, the old man with heavy bags, her fatigue after her shift. But she had wanted to help. She had not thought it meant anything. "He saw a pure heart in you," Michael said. "And he asked me to find you." Michael removed the last remnants of his disguise, revealing his true face. He was in his early 30s and handsome. "Forgive me for the deception," he said. "Give me a chance to be with you truly." Sonia was silent, digesting what she had heard. She was angry, but in his eyes she saw sincerity. Her sacrifice had turned into a miracle, and it was too much to comprehend at once. Michael reached out his hand, and after a long pause, Sonia placed hers in his. They embraced, and she felt the tension release. He was not an old man. He was someone who saw more in her than she saw in herself. Their feelings grew slowly, but now they had a chance to build something real. The morning after that fateful night came quietly, as if nature itself held its breath, watching the changes in Sonia's life. The sun barely broke through the gray clouds, casting a soft light on Michael's mansion. Sonia stood at the window of her room, looking at the dew-covered grass, trying to gather her thoughts. The night had turned everything upside down. Michael, whom she had thought was an old man, turned out to be a young man. And their marriage a test she had not even suspected. In her heart, resentment, relief, and timid hope battled. But one thing she knew for sure: she needed to return home to her parents, to the truth. "Let's go to them," she said to Michael at breakfast, clutching her teacup so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Michael nodded. His face was serious, but there was a hint of anxiety in his eyes. "I am ready, Sonia. I will explain everything to them." He reached out his hand, but she did not respond to the gesture. Not because she did not want to, but because she did not yet know how to trust him again. The road seemed endless. Michael's car glided smoothly over the bumpy roads, past fields and dilapidated fences. Sonia thought about how her parents would react, what they would say when they found out that their daughter had married a man who had hidden his true face. Anxiety welled up in her chest, and she fidgeted with the edge of her scarf until the fabric began to crease in her fingers. When they arrived at the old house, Sonia felt her throat tighten with tears. This house, with its peeling paint and creaky walls, was her world, her pain, and her love. Evan was sitting on a bench at the entrance, fixing an old fishing rod, and Maria was weeding the garden. Seeing the car, they both looked up, and their faces lit up with joy. Their girl had returned. Sonia rushed out first, ran to her mother, and buried her face in her shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of earth and fresh bread. "Mama, I have something to tell you," she said, her voice trembling. Ivan approached, hugging her tightly as only he could. Sonia felt his rough hands trembling. Mikhail got out of the car slowly, holding a small bag. He stopped a few steps away, watching this touching scene. And Sonia realized he was waiting for her permission. She nodded, and he stepped forward. "Ivan, Maria," he began, his voice low and firm. "I have something to show you." Before their eyes, he removed the remnants of his disguise, the thin layer of makeup that still remained on his temples, and the wig he had put on that morning so as not to shock Sonia from the start. The gray hair disappeared, the wrinkles smoothed out, and before the family stood a young man with dark hair and lively eyes. Evan dropped his fishing rod, Maria gasped, covering her mouth with her hand, and Alexei, who had run out of the house at the sound of the commotion, froze in the doorway, his eyes wide with shock. "It's me," Mikhail said, lowering his head as if apologizing for the deception. "I pretended to be an old man. My grandfather, a wealthy man who died a year ago, left me a will, a request to find a worthy wife. He knew about Sonia, about her kindness, and asked me to check who she really was. I wanted to understand whether she would marry me for money or from the heart. And I saw that she chose you, her family. I fell in love with her for that." A heavy silence hung over the yard. Sonia looked at her parents, waiting for their reaction. Evan coughed, his sick lungs giving a raspy wheeze, and took a step towards Mikhail. "You lied to us all," he said sternly, but there was a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. "Why?" "To find out the truth," Mikhail replied, holding his gaze. "And to give you what you deserve. I promise to take care of Sonia and all of you always." Maria began to cry, wiping her tears with the corner of her apron. "Sonchka," she whispered, embracing her daughter. "Is this true? Are you happy with him?" Sonia nodded, and tears streamed down her cheeks. "I did not know, Mama. But no. Now I believe him." Alexei approached last. He looked at Mikhail for a long time, then extended his hand. "You are a sly one," he said with a smile that held a mix of surprise and respect. "Welcome to the family." Mikhail shook his hand, and that gesture became a bridge between the past and the future. The parents were shocked, but Mikhail's words, his sincerity, and promises of care melted the ice in their hearts. They invited him into the house, and at the rickety table, where there was once barely enough food, a long conversation began, filled with questions, tears, and hopes. A week passed, but for Sonia, each day was like a new page in a book she had just begun to read. Mikhail wasted no time proving his words with actions. One morning, he asked her to go to the village again. "I have something for your family," he said with a mysterious smile, and Sonia felt her heart flutter with anticipation. When they arrived, a truck stood in front of the old house, and workers were unloading something onto the porch, puzzled. Alexei ran to Sonia with a question in his eyes. Mikhail took her hand and led her forward. "This is your new home," he said, pointing to a small but cozy cottage across the road. "I bought it for you." Sonia froze, unable to believe her ears. The house was modest but beautiful, with white walls adorned with the first spring flowers, windows shining with cleanliness, and a thin wisp of smoke rising from the chimney, indicating that the stove inside was already lit. Maria pressed her hands to her chest, Ivan coughed to hide his tears, and Alexei let out a soft whistle. "That's not all," Mikhail added, turning to Ivan. "I have arranged with doctors in the city. Your lungs have long needed treatment. Everything is paid for. You will be healthy." Sonia looked at her father and, for the first time in years, did not hear his raspy cough. He simply stood there stunned and silent. Maria rushed to Michael, embraced him like a son, and cried, "Thank you. Thank you for our girl for us." They entered the new house together. Inside, it smelled of fresh paint and wood, and on the table stood a teapot placed there by one of the workers. Sonia walked through the rooms, unable to believe that this was now their life. She saw her father sitting in a new armchair, her mother stroking the new curtains, and Alexei inspecting his room with a smile. Her family had been given a second chance. And it was more than she could have dreamed of in her wildest fantasies. That evening, Sonia stood next to Michael on the porch of the new house. The sun was setting, painting the sky in golden and pink hues, and a gentle breeze rustled her hair. She looked at him, at his young face, at his eyes filled with warmth, and thought about how strangely their story had unfolded. "I made a choice without knowing the whole truth," she said softly, squeezing his hand. "I thought I was sacrificing myself, but it led me to you." Michael smiled, pulled her closer, and embraced her. "You are not a sacrifice, Sonia. You are strength. And I am grateful to fate for finding you." They became a family, not a perfect one, but a real one. Their lives were filled with mistakes, tears, and deception, but all of it led to a love that grew with each passing day. Sonia realized that their story was a lesson. Even the smallest act of kindness, like the day she helped an old man with his bags, always finds its way back. And now, standing next to Michael, she knew that this journey was just beginning.